Another major solution that you've championed and that you proposed if elected into Congress is the notion of a human-centered economy. As a OG member of the Yang Gang, I actually really appreciate Yang's concept of a human-centered economy and the inclusion of measurements designed to track things like childhood success rates, mental health, life expectancy. What exactly does a human-centered economy look like for your district, and how would you respond to critics from the right who say that we already measure these things and it doesn't impact anybody, or critics from the left who say we don't need to reform capitalism, we need to destroy it?
Yeah, I mean, in regards to a human-centered economy, I think it doesn't just, I mean, it definitely includes the measures, firstly, to be able to measure and gauge our nation and the condition of where it's at in terms of measures like you're very familiar with, like with average life expectancy or how long a marriage is, or these other kind of, or the rate or factor of happiness and in those other areas. But I think for us, the human-centered economy is also more focused on, hey, like I think it's, and this is where the whole platform sort of resonates that theme of let's take money out of politics, let's actually focus on the people, and let's figure out a way to make the people thrive. And so I think that's the main component of a human-centered economy is how do we make the people thrive, not just financially,
Mm-hmm.
but emotionally, mentally, in their communities, like overall as a country, as a nation. Like can we talk about deep topics like we're talking about right now, like with police brutality?
Mm-hmm.
Like how do we go ahead and create forums to address it? How do we start the conversation? Do we allow our officials to just continue neglecting these things for years and years and decades? Or how do we go about really making it people focused? And I think that's what Bernie, Andrew, and Marianne have really helped on is, guys, it really comes down to the people, because if you're not connected to your communities and your people right now, how can you go to Washington and effectively represent your community when you're now, instead of legislating based on what you know about your community from the heart, now you're legislating based on what your nationalist ideals are based in your thoughts. And so when you do that, that becomes dangerous legislating. And that's what we've been in for years. And I don't think our representatives really realize to the core, they're legislating based on the idealistic thoughts and theories and whatnot, which are good to take into consideration,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also much more important, I feel. And I'm not saying it's like a certain percentage of, oh, you need to mix in 2 cups of this and then 1 cup of theory. I'm not saying that at all. But I think the very first and foremost important thing should be, what does my community want right now? And what do they think is going to help them right now? And I think that's what we really need to switch all of our gears and focus on,
Mm-hmm.
like structurally, political discourse wise as well, conversationally. And so with that, we have to take into account human measures. With that, we need to focus on other things like bringing in mental health counselors for every single school, ensuring that we have and it's kind of an integrative approach, Rainier. So whether it be with emotional support for our families and individuals, because a lot of us, just even on that level, Rainier, most of us adults, like we don't realize it, but we're operating in this fight, flight, or freeze mode in the parasympathetic state, where it's this reactive state where it was the amygdala that helped us protect ourselves against any dangers or fears that we saw were at risk to us long time ago. But now, because we don't have tigers or lions kind of reaching out to us, now we're afraid of people or certain things or certain things. And so we're always reacting. And so that's why I think it's very important to have, and it's something that started with the military, where we have child adverse risk analysis tests be done on those entering the military. So we're able to know who's more at risk for those, for trauma, for those entering the police. I mean, I would think that there's some connection in regards to those marginalized communities and they're not being able to perform well, because I grew up in a battered domestic violence household as well. So I'm not saying to screen those people, but to be able to know where these people are at, so that the police is also aware that they shouldn't be sending certain people out, and there should also be support services for them to be effective kind of advocates for the community. And so I think it's on different ways and approaches. And so whether that be with focusing, and I think with that element, it's also taking money out of politics. It's creating these measures because the statistics show, and whether or not some advocates might, or some opponents might come out and say, oh, but the happiness factor really has nothing to do with it. But I think there are a plethora of more studies out there that show otherwise, where if you're allowed to let people thrive, where if we're allowed to take off these financial strongholds that are on our people, like I envision these financial strongholds just being chains and shackles in a way around our people, and they're just trying to get out of this right now, so they're not really experiencing living life to their fullest. But if we were to able to like take those financial like strongholds and shackles off, then they're able to actually like breathe and realize, oh, this is what I was born into life to do. This is my calling for being on this earth. And like they're able to now tap into what they've always wanted to do, whether that be their life passion, dreams, or calling. And I think that's what this human-centered economy is focused on. It's creating like this sort of, I guess you would then, now I'm kind of sounding like make America the new Renaissance age. But yes, that's what we need to go to, because we've
Yeah.
been so stagnant. Like a
Hmm.
lot of people say, yeah, America's been a leader, but are we really, or are we still at the same spot that we were at decades ago, and we're still sort of hanging on to that spot? And we don't want to be overcome. And I think that's the reality that we really need to wake up to, because whatever we've been doing the past 30, 40 years in DC isn't working. And so I think that's the bigger realization that needs to happen. And so that's coupled with the human-centered economy, where it really needs to be focused on the people.
I'm really glad that you feel that way, because I know that, not just myself but millions of Americans do feel that way, in the sense that there is so much left that we have to offer, and there's so many goals and ambitions and types of work that we'd like to do, but because so many of us are chained down to student loans, or a lack of access to healthcare, we can't even make the first step to progress into our actual selves and to actualize. I hate saying this term, but to actualize sort of our destinies, because again, it's like, how can you, if you're a musician or if you want to get into politics, how can you start that if you're still just trying to worry about putting food on the table? Another interesting idea that you proposed within your policy of human-centered economy is the introduction of a new type of currency called the digital social credit. Now, for many people, the term social credit is often associated with, China's social credit system, and I'm sure the minute people hear this, they're going to rush towards labeling this overreach or government power. What makes your concept of digital social credit different from others, and what guardrails should we put in place to ensure that something like a digital social credit isn't used to exploit others on the basis of racial, gender, or economic discrimination?
So let's have you, Rainier, if you could briefly talk about more about this digital social credit system, in the sense of, I mean, is it along the same lines of being able to gauge with these other national measures of average lifelong expectancy, marriage duration? Are we talking about those as digital social factors
So I guess I'm wondering,
or
since I
credits?
yeah since
Mhm.
since I guess I'm wondering the natural inclination for people whenever you talk about social credit, because I remember I had talked about it before, like, hey,
Mhm.
what would happen if we were to measure, community involvement, or if you were to go ahead and set up a community garden. But I know that there are some people who also are alarmist in the sense that they think that social credit automatically translates to, we're going to track your every movement. So we're going to see if you are doing anything bad. And if you are, then we are going to either put it on your record, or it's going to be used against you. Like, you can't use public transit or whatever. Like, how, like, what types of things would we be tracking and measuring with this form of digital social credit?
Yeah, I mean, in regards to, I think it would be more, and I think that's more an implementation question. I mean, I think a digital social credit system or idea, it reminds me of this Wong Fu production movie that I saw. I don't know if you saw it. And I don't know, I want to look up what the name is really quick
Yeah,
for
go
those
ahead.
watching. it was very interesting, and I would not want a world like that. That's for sure. So let me just
Is it
find
like
out what the name of it.
Black Mirror stuff?
Yeah, it was oh my gosh, it was a very you had like a social rating in
Hmm.
the movie,
Hmm.
and so based on that, your rating would go up or down,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then based on that, you could sort of socialize with certain people or not.
Hmm. Hmm.
Let me just look at what that movie. Everything Before Us.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, go watch Everything Before Us.
Hmm.
Um, very interesting movie. I think that's it. That's what it's called. Yes, it's Everything Before Us. I wouldn't want a world like that. But I mean, whatever the ways to implement, and this is where kind of more research would be need to done on how do we go ahead and gauge those measures? Like, do we do it through random surveys? Do we do it through U.S. Census type surveys? Do we do it through different associations or medical doctors kind of just extracting information without private information in terms of their patients and what they've seen, so it's like a logging system. And so I think there's different ways to go about and do it.
Hmm.
I mean, and I think that's always an element to be very cautious of, Rainier, because I feel like I think one of the things that we all kind of recognize is a lot of our privacy has been breached in recent years,
Hmm.
where even our own data about us is being sold without us having any share in those in the money that's being exchanged for buying that data. And so we have bills like I think California. I just want to look it up. It's AB it's a facial recognition bill in California, and it didn't pass yesterday in the Appropriations Committee. But
Hmm.
in regards to kind of setting more protections and regulations regarding facial recognition technology, and although there were some protections in there, overall it didn't really touch upon directly the concerns of the invasion of privacy and what to do when breaches occur, or it didn't lay down what the big strong deterrents for invading privacy are, or what the big consequences of that were. And
Hmm.
so although it's important to kind of get along with the times of technology in terms of upgrading that, it's also very important to still ensure that whatever legislation we're passing, because it's always difficult to undo legislation once it's passed, is
Hmm.
you can't just create something for the sake of keeping in times with the digital times or keeping in times with public policy reasons, which although they might be important, that can't only be considered. Our privacy also needs to be considered. And so I'm actually happy that the facial recognition technology bill did not pass in California yesterday, because although there were good intentions in mind, it still fell short, where we could come into a situation where we're passing a few protections, but then in exchange, we're also exposing all of the privacy of our people. And so I wouldn't want that. And so I think in the same way, and I know there's been talk about COVID-19 tracing and how that could actually help us. And that's what other countries have used, like
Hmm.
Korea and some of the other Asian countries, in knowing where certain people and groups of people that were exposed visited.
Hmm.
And so although that's very important, I think it's also important to consider, like, there are legit concerns, because when you're going to a protest like myself, I've been going to a lot of protests this week and the past 2 months,
Hmm.
and especially because I was furloughed for 2 months and I recently started going back to work last week as a part-time immigration attorney, because I want to really focus on the campaign. But even with me, like, they're able to go into if and so the common rule for us is, if you're protesting and you don't want your privacy invaded, leave your phone at home.
Hmm.
But if I take my phone to the protest, they can see all of my texts, all of my emails, all of everything. And so for those who are watching, like, it's not to scare you to discourage you from going to protests, but it's to the point where our privacy is invaded, to the point where these government officials, they can just go ahead and ask AT&T or Verizon to give up everything. And so so I think it's for us as consumers, as citizens, to be more wary of what technology and what legislation is passing to allow our government officials to invade our privacy like this, and not after the fact, because then it's already too late. And so that's why we really need to be vigilant, because I think we're going to come to a point where no matter what app we download, like my boyfriend was telling me to download all these different apps, like from Signal to Surfshark to these different apps to protect what different people could sort of hack into and look on, there's going to be a time where we won't be able to do that, and government will see everything, and we can't let that time happen. And so it's also very important. That's a very important issue, and we shouldn't be giving away our liberties like that as well.
Awesome. Well, David,
Yeah.
I'm really excited to hear the rest of your platform. We're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. We will be
Okay.
right back.